Hello there, it has been quite some time and I'm back with another quick episode on Azure DevOps. In this video, we are going to discuss about multiple jobs and tasks in a pipeline. Also, we are going to talk about passing values from one task to another task, even from one job to another job. So let's see how to do all of that. I have logged into my Azure DevOps console as usual. I have already shared all of the codes for this episode on my GitHub account. I'll be sharing a link in the description. Let's jump into the code and let's see how to do all of those things. First of all, let's discuss about the pipeline. In our earlier episodes, we have seen from episode 2, we have taken only one step in the pipeline. On episode number 3, we have worked with multiple tasks in one pipeline. But in this scenario, we have defined the stages, jobs, and steps. In a pipeline, you can have multiple stages. For example, you can have a development stage, you can have an integration step, and you can have a deployment step, and many other things. Depends on your application architecture. So for example, in our case, we do have only one stage. So you can have multiple stages created. I'll explain each and everything. Inside one stage, maybe for our application, we do have one stage and we can have multiple jobs. For example, this is one job and this is my second job. And think this one as a CI job or continuous integration, for example. This is just a random example. It does not have any actual application. But yeah, in this job, we are creating a storage account and a container. And I have defined the steps. First, I'm going to create the storage. Then I'm checking the values whichever I have defined in the earlier step. And after that, I have defined a different job, which is upload file. You can think this as a continuous deployment or CD part. So I do have two different jobs in a stage. Now my first job is I want to create storage account and container inside it. So I've defined a PowerShell script. Let me open that one. So basically I have defined a hard-coded resource group name and a location where I want to deploy my resources. And I want to create a set of storage accounts. So here are 3 values as you can see in an array. And I do have 3 container names also in an array. So simply, if you remember our episode number 2, the same script I've just modified a little bit for this episode. So I'm creating a resource group. Then I'm looping over my storage account names. So basically this for each loop will be running 3 times and every time it will be creating a new storage account depending on the name. And similarly, I'm creating a container and I'm taking an index for that. I'm starting that index with 0 and I'm increasing the value by 1 and it will be creating the container inside that storage account. And then I want to pick any random storage account from any of these 3 and corresponding container name as well. So what I'm doing, I'm taking a random position which is out of 3. So it can be randomly picked by the programming language, any of these 3. I do not know which one. And why I am doing that? For example, there might be any runtime value which will be generated during the execution and the next jobs may not know that value earlier. So I have to pass that value. I'm creating that scenario in my programming language. So I'm taking one random storage account from that array and I want to pass that value to the next step. In the next step, I'll be taking that output and I'll be deploying or maybe uploading my file to that bucket only or to that storage account only. To pass that value, you have to write some specific statements or arguments in your code. For example, if you are using PowerShell, you have to use write output. That's a PowerShell command. And if you are using any shell script, you can use echo command and similar things exist for other programming languages. But the next set of instructions are predefined and well defined. You have to start with #VSO, then task.set variable. That means I want to set a variable for my pipeline and then variable equals to something. This is a name. For example, this is a variable name which will be accessible from my pipeline. It can be anything, ABCD as you know. Then next argument is output equals to true. So by default, if you do not have multiple jobs, for example, if you do not have to pass any value from one job to another job, then it is not needed. It's an optional part. And if you want to pass any of your value from one job to another job in that pipeline, then you have to set it as true. I'm setting a variable at pipeline level, which is called upload account. And where I'm taking the value from, this is my value, which I have taken with the random position and I have selected that value, and with that same random position I am selecting the container as well from that list which I have defined, at the starting. And I'm also passing the upload container variable. It can be anything. And I'm getting the name from this code, which is here, line number 26. I'm selecting the container, and interestingly I'm also passing the resource group name, because in the next step I'll just show you I do not have the resource group name hard coded over there. So basically, to simplify this thing, from the right side you have a value. It can be hard coded or anything, randomly generated or maybe runtime generated. You can pass that variable or that value to any of the pipeline variable, which will be also defined at the runtime, which is not defined in my variable groups or not in pipeline variables, if you remember our earlier episodes. So this will be runtime set, and you can access it from anywhere in tasks or maybe from other jobs. Let me go to my pipeline file. The first step, I have created my storage account and containers, and I've just passed those values. I want to check I'm inside the same job, this create storage job. I'm inside the same job. I do have 2 tasks in the job. Next task, I'm using a bash and just want to check what are the values I have passed. To access the values from other tasks, you need to know which variable name you have used from earlier tasks. So that is available in the variable section here. And before that, you have to specify the name of the task from where it has been set. This is only applicable if you set is output equals to true. If you do not specify is output equals to true, that means you do not have to specify anything. Then you can simply use the variable name without any dot or anything. You can just simply use this variable name. If you do not use this output equals to true, you cannot access it from other jobs. For example, I do have another job. I cannot access it from there. So that is why I had to set it. Okay. So I'm taking the 2 values. I'm displaying over my screen whenever pipeline will be running. Next job, and you can think it as a continuous deployment or CD. And I have specified one argument called depends on. And this create storage is nothing but my previous job, name of my previous job. And once my previous job is finished, then only second one will be starting, and it will get all the dependent variables which I have specified from this script. That means upload account, upload container, and resource group name. Next, I'm catching those variables which is set from earlier job, and you have to specify basically variable section and any variable name you want that to be available in that job only. It can be anything, not necessarily whichever you have defined from earlier job. It can be anything. And on purpose, I have set it differently. So I am setting upload account variable here, which I'm accessing here. This upload account will be coming from deploy storage task. That means this task, and where this task is coming from, that is coming from dependencies, create storage. This dependency I have explicitly mentioned, and the output section of it. I'm getting the output section. I'm specifying the task name and the variable name, and I'm storing the entire variable value which has been put by the outputs. I'm storing it in a variable. Similarly, I'm taking the container name which was earlier set as upload container, and on purpose I'm taking rgname as rgname. That means you can specify anything. Next, one very interesting part I want to show you. In the first job, I have not specified any agent pool or pool where my job will be running. I have set it at stage level. That means if you do not specify any pool or agent in your jobs, then whatever defined at the stage level, that will be applicable by default. By saying that, in a specific job, you can have a different image or different pool. For example, at stage level, I have defined Windows latest. But if I go to the second job, I am defining a different pool, which is Ubuntu latest. So that means you can have your multiple agent pools. I'll be explaining what is agent pool and how you can have your own private agents going forward with our course. But for this course, I just wanted to demonstrate you can use different images or different pools for different jobs. And next step is very simple. I'm using Azure PowerShell, or not Azure PowerShell. I'm using Azure CLI to upload my file to the Azure storage, which I have defined at the output level. Let me explain this task. You have to specify Azure subscription. That means the service connection which you have defined. And if you remember our earlier episodes, we have discussed about Azure service connections. Then I'm writing an inline script instead of a file path. You can easily use a file path here as well. Now let me explain what I'm doing. As you already know, if you use service connection in your pipeline, your job is by default, I'll not say job, your task is by default authenticated with Azure. So I do not have to explicitly authenticate again. And same thing has been used in the previous step where I have created my storage account and container as well. The same Azure subscription, that means service connection, has been used. In the first step, I am getting the storage account key using Azure CLI, and then I'm using that key to upload that file into that account. So basically this RG name in the dollar part, it is coming from my previous outputs from my previous job. Similarly, this storage account name is again a local variable and the value is coming from previous job. Similarly, I'm using the storage account name and the key which I have just now created in the first argument. So basically by this way, you can have your runtime values passed over from one job to another job, or maybe from one task to another task, and you can access those values using this pattern. Dollar in a parenthesis, you have to specify the name. So basically that's all. As I have already pushed this code into Azure DevOps, let me go to Azure DevOps, and this pipeline file is already present. Let me just verify. Yeah, DevOps episode 4. Let me go to pipelines and let me create a new pipeline as usual. I'll be taking Azure Git. This is my Git from Azure, and existing Azure pipeline YAML file. I need to specify the path. I'll be using DevOps episode 4.yaml. Click on continue. And before that, let me go to my Azure console and let me show you I do not have any resource group or any storage account created as of now. And the same file I was explaining, I do not have any triggers. I'll be explaining triggers from next episode. You can do save this one. I need to rename it to something else. Click on edit, click on triggers, and here you can edit the name. I can rename it as something episode 4 save and queue. That means it will be saving my name and it will be running the next job on that pipeline. So you can see there are two jobs which I have defined in that stage, and it may take some time. Let's wait for that. Now my first job has completed and second job also. On the first job, as you see, we have defined Windows image, and if I go to the second job, on the second job it has some different image which is Ubuntu. Let me go to my Azure console. Let me refresh that. Resource group is present now. I'm going to the resource group, and you see here are 3 storage accounts, and let me go to the third one first where I have not uploaded. We can check the container. This is my container, name is 3 here as well, and no files are here. If I go to storage account again, go to the first one where I have uploaded, that means script had automatically taken that value by the random, and let me go inside the container. Here is my file. So that's all guys. Thanks for watching. See you in the next videos.